Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Deontay Wilder, the bronze bomber, he can't help himself. He just has to keep throwing out bits of information about what he wants to do and fighters that he's calling out, when in actual fact, nothing is happening. Nothing is happening at the moment. Nothing's been happening for 6 months. So let's just break down his statement from his interview with PBC Jabs, which you can find on Premier Boxing Champions Facebook page. So as part of this clip where basically he was just talking to the camera, he said a number of interesting things. First off, he said he's been getting his hand right. So that does back up something that I had in a previous video, which I'd picked up, and it didn't seem to really be out there, that he has been rehabbing some injuries, and he actually spoke of his right hand. So I think when putting into context everything that's been happening, this supposed Luis Ortiz fight, the Stiverne fight that hasn't been made, I mean, Wilder has been using that time to get his body right, and that's exactly what he said. So for all the people that said he hasn't been injured, well, actually he has been injured, and he confirmed it. He spoke about wanting champions, him wanting the best. See, the problem with that, though, is actually you've got a mandatory, and you need to actually take care of that. Then you can do whatever you want. Just get it out of the way. We know that the Stiverne fight, the second fight, the rematch, no one really wants to see that. I don't want to see that. You don't want to see that. Deontay Wilder certainly doesn't want to actually have that fight. But in my view, he should just get it out of the way. We've actually lost almost all of this year. So he had his comeback fight in February. Since then, he's been on the shelf, apparently rehabbing, for much of that time as well. We just didn't know that. But we've had this other situation where Stiverne just won't get out of the way. He wants his shot. That comes back to the WBC. Why did they install him as the mandatory in the first place? It was a silly decision. He's had one fight in 2 years, and he got knocked down in that fight against Derek Rossi. So, I mean, you got to ask yourself, what the hell was the WBC doing? But that is that. It is the situation. He has to fight him. But as of a few weeks ago, we got news that, well, this Deontay Wilder versus Stiverne fight might be put to the side for 1 minute, so a Luis Ortiz and Deontay Wilder fight could be held. So we were starting to get excited about this. But then it just sort of went quiet, and Stiverne called in a new management team that included lawyers and whatnot, and has been very adamant. I am getting my shot. No one is going to walk over me. I will not take any step-aside money. So let's put that to one side for a second. In this PBC Jabs interview that he did, well, it was really more a piece to camera. So he talked about Luis Ortiz. And he sort of started off saying, he would love to have an Ortiz fight. Ortiz is considered the boogeyman of the sport. But then he sort of, it was a bit of a double-edged compliment. He said, he's done all this sort of stuff, but he's done nothing to deserve that reputation. I think his exact quote was, Ortiz hasn't really done nothing. So, and then people automatically assume because he's from Cuba and he's got an aggressive style that he's a dangerous fighter and one to be avoided. So he added, and I'll quote him directly here, I'm the one that's calling him out. I'm the one that wants to see him in the ring, and I do mean soon. If you're the boogeyman of the sport and people scared to fight you, then let me show you who ain't. He went on to say that, and this was something that I thought was very interesting, because you might remember 6 months ago, Luis Ortiz said at short notice he would step in after Warzyk popped dirty for Pets. Ultimately, that fight went to Gerald Washington, but Luis Ortiz said on a few weeks' notice he would take that fight and fight Wilder, and Wilder said no. He didn't want that work because Luis Ortiz was a drug cheat. So what's changed? I mean, and that's the big question here. I mean, I would say it has to do more with Luis Ortiz is now signed with Al Haymon. Deontay Wilder is an Al Haymon fighter. So his new line, this is what he's starting to run now, is that he hadn't fought Luis Ortiz previously because of his drug use, but it wasn't an issue now. So make of that what you will. But in terms of Stiverne, he said, Stiverne, he's been crying, he needs to sit aside. Stiverne can be next, but I want to make that Luis Ortiz fight. And he even sort of said, well, actually, if Joshua does get stripped off the WBA belt for not fighting Luis Ortiz, which, actually that could well happen, given that Eddie Hearn has said Anthony Joshua is going to fight Kubrat Pulev in the IBF next. So, it wouldn't surprise me if Joshua ultimately does get stripped. So he sort of said, Deontay Wilder, put the belt on the line, wouldn't that be great? And then he concluded by saying, another couple of weeks, hopefully something will be announced, stay patient. So there is quite a lot to unpack there. Certainly with Deontay Wilder, he's been saying a number of things recently. A number of things. He's been calling out all manner of fighters, Joseph Parker, Anthony Joshua, and obviously more recently, Luis Ortiz's name has come into the equation. So he's been calling out a number of fighters who have been unavailable. And so some of us, the more cynically minded, have been like, well, Deontay Wilder, your record is filled with bums. You haven't fought anyone decent. Stiverne is the best name on your record. Why don't you actually fight someone? And I think Deontay Wilder himself, he knows that the pressure is on him to get a good name on his record. He will never get the credibility he craves if he doesn't beat someone good. So in terms of calling out Luis Ortiz there, again, repeatedly, well, for me, it's a bit like the boy who cried wolf. Because this is about the 5th, 6th, 7th, I've lost count. How many times in recent weeks and recent months has Deontay Wilder been on social media, jawing his mouth, basically saying, I want to fight X, I want to fight Y. All the while, he's got this mandatory situation he hasn't been taken care of. And obviously, he also said he has been injured and he's been getting his hand right. I needed to get my hand right. That's exactly what he said. So for me, when he starts to say these things about fighters that he wants to fight, it doesn't have the same impact. I'm less inclined to believe him the more he says it and the more nothing happens. And in terms of the communications perspective, if you're saying something and there's no payoff, then people will just, eventually become incredulous. And actually what's going to happen is the people who are on the fence about Wilder, who want to believe that he wants a big fight, if they keep hearing this and nothing happens, well, they'll just ultimately turn against him and end up being, not a hater, but they'll just be like, oh yeah, Deontay Wilder, we've heard this before. And I'm fast becoming in that camp because I do like Deontay Wilder. He is a knockout machine. I like watching him fight. He does some devastating stuff in the ring. But look at the record. Not a lot there. He's been champion for the best part of 3 years now, and there's no real big champion sort of level fighter on his record. They're basically, most of them are, fringe contenders who no one really rated to begin with. Sure, they had to be in the top 15, but, you know what these sanctioning bodies are like. There's a lot of people in the top 15 who people just go, they're a bum. They're a bum. So I'm not putting Deontay Wilder's opponents in the bum category, but then again, they're not top tier either. So he's got a sort of a problem here with his image because he's not actually rectifying that problem. And the first step, I know he doesn't want to do it, but he's got to get rid of or sort out the situation with Stiverne so he can actually free himself up to deliver on what he's saying. Because otherwise, it is boy who cried wolf stuff. The publicity problem and the actual, the way people feel towards him and the alienation that is developing, that will only get worse. There's a reason that Anthony Joshua, his name is more popular in the US than Deontay Wilder. It's because Wilder isn't actually doing anything to warrant the fans' attention. So it'd be good to see Deontay Wilder actually, he's got a lot of people behind him and he's in the Al Heyman stable. So Lou DiBella and Al Heyman need to sort something out for Deontay Wilder because otherwise, well, they're really just holding the belt hostage. And no one wants to see that. And if Deontay Wilder goes on to have one big fight against one person of note and loses the belt, then all of us will say, well, he held the belt hostage and clearly he was looking to cash out. And some of the signals that he's been saying, I want champions, I want the best. Well, you say that now, but you haven't been fighting that level of opposition. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. So you need to get your story straight. But it also can't just be Anthony Joshua or bust. It can't be that huge money fight to cash out. You need to put a few names on your record now to really get the credibility back in the eyes of fans. What do you think? What do you make of this whole situation and Deontay Wilder popping up saying basically the same thing over and over? Let me know. That's it from me. Hit like and subscribe. I'm out.